Once upon a time, in a vibrant and bustling village called Amanzi, nestled deep within the heart of the African savannah, there lived a boy named Kofi. Amanzi was no ordinary village. It was a place where laughter danced in the air, where every blade of grass hummed with stories of ancient times, and where every corner held a secret waiting to be discovered. Kofi was a curious boy with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. He wasn't the strongest in the village nor the fattest. His friends often teased him for spending too much time daydreaming or thinking up riddles instead of joining them in their games. But Kofi had a gift, a cleverness that went beyond simple physical strength. He loved puzzles, stories, and above all, solving mysteries. One evening, the elders of Amanzi gathered around the great baobab tree, their faces grim. The village had been suffering for months. The rains had not come, and the river that flowed through Amanzi had dried up. The animals were scarce, the crops were wilting, and the people were growing desperate. "We must find a solution," said Elder Akoto, the wisest of them all. "The gods are angry, and we need to appease them. But how?" No one had an answer. The villagers whispered about strange happenings in the forest, about how the animals had been acting unusually, and about a mysterious figure who had been seen wandering near the riverbank. That night, as the village slept, Kofi lay wide awake in his small hut, thinking. Something didn't sit right with him. If the gods were angry, wouldn't they have sent a sign? And who was this mysterious figure people were whispering about? The next morning, Kofi decided to take matters into his own hands. He gathered his things, a small bag, a slingshot, and some dried meat, and set off towards the forest, determined to solve the mystery. As Kofi ventured deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller, their branches intertwining like the arms of giants. The air was thick with the scent of earth and wildflowers, and strange noises filled the air, chirps, rustles, and distant growls. But Kofi wasn't afraid. He had his wits about him, and that was all he needed. After hours of walking, he reached the river bank, or what was left of it. The once mighty Amanzi River was now nothing but a trickle of muddy water. But something caught Kofi's eye. Footprints, large, clawed, and definitely not human. Kofi crouched down to inspect them. They were fresh. Whoever or whatever had made them was still nearby. He followed the prints, his heart pounding in his chest. The footprints led him to a large cave hidden behind a waterfall that had all but dried up. Inside, he could hear a strange humming sound like the low growl of a beast. Taking a deep breath, Kofi crept into the cave. It was dark, but his eyes quickly adjusted. At the far end of the cave, he saw a figure sitting on a rock, its back turned to him. It was tall, with long arms and a mane of shaggy hair. Kofi's first instinct was to run, but something about the figure intrigued him. "Who are you?" Kofi called out, his voice steady despite his fear. The figure turned slowly. To Kofi's surprise, it wasn't a beast at all, but an old man, though not just any old man. His skin was as dark as the night sky, and his eyes gleamed like the stars. His hair was long and wild, and his clothes were made of leaves and vines. "I am Mosi," the man said, his voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder, guardian of the forest and keeper of its secret. Kofi was taken aback. "Why have you come here?" "The village is suffering. The river has dried up, and the people believe the gods are angry." Mosi smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "The gods have nothing to do with it, boy. The river dried up because I willed it so." Kofi's eyes widened. "But why? The people are starving. The animals have left. What do you have to gain from this?" Mosi stood up, towering over Kofi. "I have lived in this forest for centuries. The people of Amanzi have taken from it without giving back. They cut down trees, hunt the animals, and use the water without thinking of the consequences. I decided it was time to teach them a lesson." Kofi, though frightened, stood his ground. "But punishing the village won't make them understand. They don't know you exist. All they see is suffering." Mosi tilted his head, intrigued by Kofi's boldness. And what would you have me do, boy? Let them continue their ways until there is nothing left. Kofi thought for a moment, his mind racing. Then an idea struck him. What if I made a deal with you? I'll prove to you that the people of Amanzi can change. If I succeed, you bring the river back. If I fail, well, you can keep the river dry. Mosi chuckled, a deep echoing sound. And how do you propose to prove this? Kofi smiled, his cleverness kicking in. Give me 1 week. I will show you that the village can live in harmony with the forest. If after that you are not convinced, you can punish us however you fit. Mosi stared at Kofi for a long time, then nodded. Very well, boy. You have 1 week, but know this, I will be watching. With that, Mosi disappeared into the shadows, leaving Kofi alone in the cave. The boy let out a long breath. He had a plan, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. Kofi returned to the village and immediately gathered the elders. He told them about Mosi, the guardian of the forest, and the deal he had made. The elders were skeptical, but they had no other option. So under Kofi's guidance, the village began to change. They stopped cutting down trees and started planting new ones. They built bird houses and created small sanctuaries for the animals. The hunters were taught to take only what they needed, and the villagers found ways to conserve water. As the days passed, the village transformed. It was hard work, but the people began to see the benefits. The animals returned, the crops started to grow again, and even the air felt fresher. On the 7th day, Mosi appeared in the village square. The villagers gathered around, watching in awe as the guardian stepped forward. Well, boy, said Mosi, his eyes scanning the changes in the village. It seems you've kept your end of the bargain. Kofi smiled, but there was a hint of mischief in his eyes. Not just me. Everyone in Amanzi played their part. We've learned our lesson. Mosi nodded, a rare smile spreading across his face. You have indeed, and for that I will return the river to you. With a wave of his hand, Mosi summoned the rains. The sky darkened, and within moments a gentle downpour began. The villagers cheered as the river swelled once more, its waters rushing through the village like a long-lost friend. But just as Mosi turned to leave, Kofi stepped forward. Wait, he said. I have one more question. Mosi raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what is that? Kofi grinned. You said you were the guardian of the forest, but who's the guardian of the river? Mosi chuckled, his eyes twinkling. You are, Kofi. You and every child of Amanzi. Remember this, nature doesn't belong to one being alone. It belongs to all of us. And with that, Mosi vanished, leaving Kofi and the villagers standing in the rain, their hearts light and their minds filled with hope for the future. From that day on, Kofi became known as Kofi the Clever, not just for his quick thinking, but for his ability to bring change where it was needed most. And the village of Amanzi thrived, its people living in harmony with the land, just as Mosi had hoped. But every now and then, when the wind blew just right, Kofi would hear a loud chuckle on the breeze, and he knew that was Mosi, still watching. And so the legend of Kofi the Clever lived on, a story passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that even the smallest among us can make the biggest difference.